Chapter 28, Need to define God, Self, etc. Garasara. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Artless remark. Oh you. Well, I suppose it's a gift, to stir hell to its most abysmal horror with one small remark slipped in at the end. Scorpion. Higher self, God within us. Dear lady, you could never have picked 5 words from Iroquois, or Banty, or Barsato or the jargon of Master François Villain, or Pictish, which severally and together convey less to my mind. No, no, not less, I mean more, so much more that it amounts to nothing at all. Spencer Montmorency Bourbon Hohenstaufen sounds very exclusive and aristocratic, and even posh or ritzy, but if you bestow these names upon every male child, the effect tends to diminish. The Southern gentleman Lee Davis, recently hanged for rape and murder, was not a near relation either of the general or the president. He was a nigger. 1 refers to a pious phrase at the end of her letter. Gimme the old spade, I've got to go digging again. 1. Higher. Here we fall straight into the arms of Freud. Why higher? Because in a scrap it is easier to strangle him if you are on top. When very young children watch their parents enact a coitus, a circumstance exceedingly usual almost anywhere outside England, and even here where house-room is restricted, the infant supposes that his mother, upon whom he depends entirely for nourishment, is being attacked by the intrusive stranger whom they want him to address as Dad. From this seed springs an over-under complex, giving rise later on, in certain cases, to whole legions of neuroses. Now then, make it a little clearer, please, just what you mean by higher. Skeet seems to connect it with hills, swellings, boils, the maternal breast. Is that reason enough for us to connect it with the idea of advantage, or superiority merely translates it into Latin worth, or, no, it's really too difficult. Of course, sometimes it has a bad meaning, as of temperature in fever, but nearly always it implies a condition preferable to low. Applied to the self, it becomes a sort of trade name. Nobody tells me if he means ku, or bar, or cabs, or ut of the Upanishads or Orgaides of the Neoplatonists, or Adonai of Bulwer-Lytton, or, here we are with all those thrice accursed alternatives. There is not, cannot be, any specific meaning unless we start with a sound skeleton of ontogenic theory, a well-mapped hierarchy of the cosmos, and define the term anew. Then why use it? To do so can only cause confusion, unless the context helps us to clarify the image. And that is surely rather a defeatist attitude, isn't it? When I first set myself to put a name to my mission, the contemplation carried me halfway across southwest China. I considered these alternatives. I thought to cut the Gordian knot, and call it by Abramelin's title the Holy Guardian Angel because, I mused, that will be as intelligible to the villagers of Pupeng as to the most learned pundits. Moreover, the implied theory was so crude that no one need be bound by it. All this is rubbish, as you will see when we reach the discussion on self. To explain now would lead to too unwieldy a digression. 2. Within. If you don't mind, we'll tackle this now, while higher is fresh in our minds, for it is also a preposition. First you want to go up, then you want to go in. Why? As higher gave the idea of aggression, of conquest, within usually implies safety. Always we get back to that stage of history when the social unit, based on the family, was little less than condition number 1 of survival. The house, the castle, the fortified camp, the city wall, the gens, the clan, the tribe, the patrie. To be outside means danger from cold, hunger and thirst, raiding parties, highway robbers, bears, wolves, and tigers. To go out was to take a risk, and, your labor and courage being assets to your kinsman, you were also a bad man, in fact, a bounder or outsider. Debauch is simply to go out of doors. St. John says, without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and adulterers and idolaters and so on. 2. We of Thelema challenge all this briskly. The word of sin is restriction. Ally, 41. Our formula, roughly speaking, is to go out and grab what we want, We do this so thoroughly that we grow thereby, extending our conception of I by including each new accretion instead of remaining a closely delineated self, proud of possessing other things, as do the Black brothers. We are wholehearted extroverts. The penalty of restricting oneself is anything from neurosis to downright lunacy, in particular, melancholia. You ask whether these remarks do not conflict with my repeated definition of initiation as the way in. Not at all. The inmost is identical with the all. As you travel inward, you become able to perceive all the layers which surround the self from within, thus enlarging the scope of your vision of the universe. It is like moving from a skirmishing patrol to GHQ, and the object of so doing is obviously to exercise constantly increasing control over the whole army. Every step in rank enables you both to see more and to do more, but one's attention is inevitably directed outward. When the entire system of the universe is conterminous with your comprehension, inward and outward become identical. But it won't do at all to seek anything within but a point of view, for the simple reason that there is nothing else there. It is just like all those symbols in the Book of Thoth. As soon as you get to the end of anything, you suddenly find it is the beginning. To formulate the idea of self at all, you must posit limitations. Anything that is distinguishable is a mere temporary, and arbitrary, selection of the finite from the infinite. Whatever you chose to think of, it changes, it grows, it disappears. You have got to train your mind to canter through those leafy avenues of thought upon the good green turf of indifference, when you can do it without conscious effort, so that up down, in out, far near, black white, and so on for everything, appears quite automatically. You are already as near an initiate as makes no matter. 3. Self. For a full discussion of this see letter Xli. 4. God. This is really too bad of you. Of all the hopelessly mangled words in the language, you settle with unerring sadism on the most brutally butchered. Crippen was an amateur. Skeet hardly helps us at all, except by warning us that good has nothing whatever to do with it. 3. Dia comes from Deus, with all its Sol Jupiter references, and Dios, which Plato thought meant a runner, hence, sun, moon, planets. The best I can do for you, honest Injun, is the Russian word for godbog, connected probably, though the Lithuanian, with the Welsh bwq a spectre or hobgoblin. Bug, too. Not very inspiring, is it, to replace the old hundredth by hush. 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 Here come the bogeyman. Or is it? Enough of this fooling. Out, trusty rapier, and home to the stone heart of the audacious woman that wrote God within us. I know you thought you knew more or less what you meant when you wrote it, but surely that was a mere slip. An instant's thought would have warned you that the word wouldn't stand even the most superficial analysis. You meant something which seems to me the most perfect symbol of all that I love, worship, admire, all that class of verb. But nobody else will have the same set of qualities in his private museum. You have, as everyone has always done, made another God in your own image. Then the Vedantists define God as having neither quality nor quantity, and some yogis have a practice of setting up images to knock them down at once with not that. Not that. And the Buddhists won't admit any God at all in anything at all like the sense in which you use the word. What's worse, whatever you may mean by God conveys no idea to me. I can only guess by the light of my exceedingly small knowledge of you and your general habits of thought and action. Then what sense was there in chucking it at my head? Half a brick would have served you better. You think you can explain to me viva voce, perhaps? Don't you dare try. Whatever you said, I should prove to be nonsense, philosophically and in a dozen other ways. And the county council ambulance would bundle you off in your battered and bewildered debris to the bug house, as is so etymologically indicated. Do see it simply, the word must in any event connote ideas of neshkama, not of ruach. But you use the word all the time. Yes, I do, and rely on the context to crystallize this most fluid, or gaseous, of expressions. Crippen was a famous English poisoner who was caught and hung. One of the most amusing passages of irony is to be found in the Questions of King Milinda, where the Arhad Nagasena demolishes Mahabrahma. 5. Us. Why us? Is this a reference to the old school tie, or that finishing school in Brussels, and the ticket to the royal enclosure at Ascot? I do not suppose for a moment that you meant it that way, but it's there. And so, anecdote of Lautz. The old one was surrounded as usual by a galaxy of adoring disciples, and they were trying to get him to show them where the Tao was to be found. It was in the sun and moon, he admitted, it was in the Son of Heaven and in the superior man. Not George Nathaniel Kurtzen, however. It was in the blossoms of springtide, and in the chilling winds that swept over from Siberia, and in the wild geese that it bore southward when their instinct bade them. In short, the catalogue began to look as if it were going to extend indefinitely, and an impatient disciple, pointing to certain traces left by a mule in its recent passage, asked, "And is the Tao also in that?" The master nodded, and echoed, "Also in that." Then what becomes of this privileged us? We are obliged to extend it to include everything. Then, as we have just seen, God also is unfettered by definitions. Net result, God within us means precisely nothing at all. And so it does, by Bradman. Bind nothing. Let there be no difference made among you between any one thing and any other thing, for thereby there cometh hurt. But whoso availeth in this, let him be the chief of all. Ally, 22-23. I implore you not to point out that, this being the case, words like hurt and chief cannot possibly mean anything. The fact is that if we are to get on peaceably in the club, we have to know when to take any given expression in a Pickwickian sense. In the Ruach all the laws of logic apply, they don't in Neshkama. The real meaning of the passage is simple enough, if you understand that it refers to a specific result of initiation. You have to be able to reckon up the universe, as a whole and in every part, and to get rid of all its false or partial realities by discarding everything but the one reality which is the sole truth in, and of illusion. There is one set of equations which express the relation of the perceiver and the perceived, adjusted in accordance with the particular limitations on both sides. Another cancels out all the finite terms, and leaves us with an ultimate x equals o equals o. See? I know I'm a disheartening kind of bloke, and it does seem so unfriendly to jump down a fellow's throat every minute or so when she tries to put it ever so nicely, and it is so easy, isn't it to play the game of sanctimonious grandiloquence, and surely what was said was perfectly harmless, and no, number not harmless at all. My whole object is it train you to silence every kind of hypothetical speculation, and formulae both resonant and satisfying. I want you to abhor them, abominate them, despise them, detest them, mishear them, hate them, loathe them, and da capo. And to get on with your practice. Then when you get the results, you can try, albeit uselessly, to fit your own words to the facts, if you should wish to communicate, for any good reason, your experiences to other people. Then, despairing of your impotence, how glad you will be that you have been trained not to let anyone fob you off with phrases. Love is the law, love under will. Fraternally yours, 666.